Hey, welcome to Route 66. We're in day 156 in our journey through the Bible. We're in the book of Job. Job is actually a poetry book. If you were to see it in Hebrew, it's poetry. Now, when I think of poetry, I think of rhyming sentences, but this isn't rhyming, but it is a little story going back and forth between some friends. They're talking about some pretty deep subjects. Job and his friends through Job's suffering. And so let's pick it back up here. We're in Job chapter 15. We've got 4 chapters that we're going to read today. So Job chapter 15, Eliphaz, one of his friends, accuses Job of being arrogant, of speaking with arrogance, because because Job isn't listening to their wisdom. Then evidently he thinks he knows more and he's arrogant. And so that just shows that he's sinful, and he probably has more sin than that. And that's why God has punished him, because he's sinful. You must be suffering because you're sinful, and your arrogance proves it. Because why? You're not listening to us. So anyway, it's kind of circular reasoning, but you get where he's going. If you don't agree with me, you're the one that's wrong. And that's where Eliphaz is. And then Job responds, I love it. You all are miserable comforters. No, no, you came to comfort me, not to give me answer. You came to comfort me, but you are not comfort me. You're making my pain worse. All these harsh words from his friends, they're kicking him when he's down. He famously says in verse 2, miserable comforters are you all. He feels crushed by God, but he wishes somebody would just come and help him, and nobody is there. So he pleads for that. And in verse 17, his despair gets deeper and deeper. He talks about hopelessness. He feels abandoned. He feels mocked. His hope in God and his hope in life is fading. The only thing he has to look forward to is the grave, and he doesn't know even about that. He refuses to pretend that he's guilty when he's not. He's not going to lie. He maintains his character through it all. And then another friend, Bildad, talks about the fate of the wicked. He gives a very harsh description of what happens to the wicked. And this is what happens. And they're in the grave, and they lose their light, and nobody remembers them, and there's terror, and there's death, implying that Job has been wicked, and this is what's going to happen to him. And so they're just kind of beating him up a little bit here. And so just be very careful. So here's some lessons from this right here. One lesson: truth without compassion becomes cruelty. As I read through these chapters, it seems like they're just talking about the same thing. Why did God put all this conversation in here? And I think to re-emphasize to us that just because you have the truth doesn't mean you have to be mean about it. Truth without kindness, truth without love is just about as bad as love without truth. And so what we need to make sure is that we care about the people that we're sharing the truth with. And that's what they're doing. They had the truth, but they misapplied it to Job. Truth must be spoken with grace and love. Another lesson: suffering people need advocates, not accusations. They need somebody to hold them up. There are times when we do need to knock people down a peg or two, aren't there? Yes, there are. But when they're suffering and when they're hurting, that's not the time. That's the time to build them up, to help them, to encourage them. And that's what they needed. And that's what Christ does. Christ is our mediator. He goes between us and God. And that's what this foreshadows, the need that we have. And a third lesson is despair doesn't mean that faith is dead. Job is down to the bottom. He has almost given up on hope. But if you remember back when his wife, after he'd gone through all this, his wife said, curse God and die. And that's what Satan said. He'll curse you to your face when all these bad things happen to him. And no matter how bad Job felt and got, No matter how abandoned he felt from God, he never gave up on God. As a matter of fact, he called out to him. His faith, though that appeared to be weak, was very strong because it withstood all of this. And make sure that your faith remains whole in God in spite of the stuff that you go through. So these are challenging chapters to read. I'm glad I'm not Job. I've gone through some bad